Lately, I've noticed a lot of videos with black creators claiming they had no idea that white people were once enslaved by Muslims in the Barbary slave trade. It must be mentioned that some of the Muslims were black and some were white, and blacks were also enslaved in the Barbary slave system. The big difference between the Barbary slave trade and slavery in the United States was if you converted to Islam, you would no longer be a slave and you would no longer be abused. In most cases, you would be promoted to a servant class. Slavery was not based on color. That was invented in the United States years after Bacon's rebellion for the purposes of establishing a yeoman class that would protect the planters in the event of another huge uprising. Slavery has been around for thousands of years. I really don't understand how anyone believes white people have never been enslaved. The Roman Empire had slaves from around the world, but there has never been a system of slavery created to exclusively enslave white people and justify it by claiming that whites aren't human. J.A. Rogers, in his book Sex and Race, stated the following: "By all accounts, the Africans treated their white slaves as harshly as the American colonials did the blacks. There was this exception, however. The Christians always had the alternative of embracing Islam and becoming one with the fold, a step which was highly repugnant to most of them. Of course, you had to prove yourself after converting. While some reported having difficulty doing so, many transitioned with ease into their new life. Many of the people captured were once impoverished before they were taken as slaves. However, if you lived the good life before being taken, the only hope you had of returning to life as you once knew it was if a convincing ransom was offered and hopefully accepted." Some captives, such as William Ray, author of Horrors of Slavery, used their experience as a slave to speak out against American slavery. But years after the establishment of slavery in America, Archibald Robbins, a gentleman who was held as a slave to African masters in 1815, used his experience to justify American slavery, stating the following: "These Africans of every name and feature and complexion take delight in enslaving each other. It can hardly be expected that an American who has for months and years been enslaved by them can feel so much compassion towards a slave here as those do who have always enjoyed blessings of humanity and liberty." Now, say what you will about this guy, he does say one thing. He says that the Africans that enslaved him also enslaved people who look like them, of many different shades and complexions. It didn't matter what color you were. If you were caught with your guard down, especially while traveling through the Mediterranean, you could be taken as a slave. Often you'll hear people blame Arabs for the number of Africans sold into slavery in America, but the truth is it was America, due to laws that made it illegal to enslave a white person who had a thirst for exclusively black slaves. Arabs merely filled the demand, and many of those Arabs were black. They had no tribal or cultural allegiance to those who were taken. The color of the skin simply didn't matter. It was business. But whites serving as slaves wasn't just a thing in the Mediterranean or North Africa. Many Muslim writers and travelers have written about seeing slave girls, both black and white, in the Kingdom of Mali and in the Kingdom of Ghana. One traveler wrote, "In the town of Argos, there are handsome buildings and fine houses. Its inhabitants are a mixture from all countries who have settled there because of its many advantages and briskness of its markets and commerce. The like of the women of Argos are not to be found anywhere else. Slave girls are brought from there who are beautiful and white in color, with swaying bodies, handsome fat buttocks, and wide shoulders, and I'll let you read the rest of that." While traveling in Ghana, one Muslim writer wrote, "God has endowed the slave girls there with laudable characteristics, both physical and moral, more than can be desired. Their bodies are smooth, their black skins are lustrous, their eyes are beautiful, their noses well shaped, their teeth white, and they smell fragrant." But all forms of slavery are evil, and I certainly won't defend any of them. America did not invent slavery. They did, however, invent a color-based slavery system as a legal process to determine who could and who could not be fully owned as a legal piece of property. And once you were owned, chances were pretty high that you and your offspring would be doomed to a lifetime of slavery. There was no ransom to be paid, and no one was coming to your rescue. Your past identity was beaten out of you if necessary. Even your name was changed. You either accepted it or you were tortured until you did so. In America, you were not going to work your way out of slavery. You weren't one day going to become a trusted soldier of the state that once enslaved you. After a certain point in America, it just wasn't legally possible. You could convert to Christianity, but you would still remain a slave. But the thing that was most horrifying about the American race-based slave model was how fast it was adopted around the world and promoted by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has often allowed itself to be used as a convenient tool for global colonizers through a series of documents called the Papal Bulls. The document would be revised according to the needs of whoever the colonizers were at the time. Throughout history, the Church would use these documents to communicate to colonizers that God says it's okay to commit crimes against humanity as long as you're spreading the word of God while doing so. But even before American laws that doomed newly kidnapped Africans to a life of slavery were passed, white servants often received less severe punishments than their black counterparts. In the year 1640, the Virginia courts sentenced runaway servant John Punch to serve his master for the rest of his natural life. In 1660, Virginia law dictated that any English servant that ran away with a Negro shall serve that Negro's master for the time that the Negro was absent. But the laws that would later seal the fate of Africa were passed in the 1700s. In 1705, all imported servants who were not Christian would be held as real estate. With Islam running rampant all across Africa, the odds of an African being Christian were at best extremely low. In 1723, Virginia's anti-assembly law kept blacks from meeting or forming communities. Also in 1723, Virginia law limited free Negroes to those who were born in that class. Then the knockout punch came in the year 1750 when Virginia passed a law defining the distinction between a slave and a servant, relegating all slaves to the status of property. Now, any African taken would most certainly meet all of the qualifications to be considered real estate rather than a human being. These laws were passed in all southern slave states and would establish the beginning of a color-based class system that would divide the lower class for generations to come. Those who qualified as servants now had a dog in the fight and would prove to be loyal protectors of the new class that now valued them over another group of people. In turn, they would also become the protectors of the planter class and the oligarch class. As I stated before, America didn't invent slavery, but it did invent its brand of slavery. If you liked the video, please subscribe and hit that like button because it does make a huge difference. If you're on Twitter, please visit the YouTube website to like and sub the channel. Thanks for watching.